Welcome, everyone, to God's Rescue and Restoration Plan. The next session, session 4, the Rainbow Covenant. We're going to jump right into this and review the slide that we ended up with at the end of the last session. We learned some things about God's Rescue and Restoration Plan last time. We just want to review. First of all, the disobedience of Adam and Eve caused catastrophic consequence to mankind in paradise, which prompted the need for a rescue and restoration plan for mankind and the earth. So God introduced that plan. And part of the plan, there's several things that are apparent, are necessary to make this plan come to pass. One of them is that a Messiah is needed. He'll come, he'll contest the serpent. It's an unconditional promise by God, which carries forward in time. Whoops. Confession of sin by mankind starts. And the concept of substitution sacrifice starts. All three of those things, the Messiah, confession of sin, concept of substitution sacrifice, all of them are important for the plan moving forward. And Satan is working on getting all of mankind in a place where they cannot be rescued. That is what his goal is. Keep that Messiah from coming. So here we go. This is the timeline as we had it at the end of the session. And now this session, we're going to add 1,000 more years to it, to 1960 BC. And pretty early on in that 1,000 years, Noah is born in the year 2906 BC. And I think it's interesting to notice that there is no Bible yet. There's no written word of God yet. So how are they learning about God, or how are they remembering what God said? Because it's not written down in the Bible yet. Well, I think, and I'm sure it was word of mouth. They lived a very long time in those days. They had a lot of overlap of generations, and they could teach generations and generations about what they knew, what they learned, what they experienced, what they knew about God and what God had told them. As an illustration of that, we look at Enosh, who was one of Adam's grandsons. He died in 2802 BC. So if you compare the death date of Enosh to Noah's birth date, you see that they overlapped by over 100 years. That's a long time. I would venture to say no one listening to this recording and this class right now in this session is 100 years old, right? And if anyone is, congratulations. But I don't think so. So 100 years, in 100 years' time, Noah had plenty of time to go hunt up Enosh and say, hey, when you sat on your grandpa's knee and you got to ask him about what paradise was like and what God was like, what the plan, 1,000 questions he could have asked and answered. Same with grandma. So he could have learned directly from Enosh, grandson. It's possible. Don't know if that's what happened or not, but there'd be lots of opportunities for many people to do things like that and really maintain the knowledge of God at that time. So we're going to hop over to Genesis chapter 6, starting in verse 5. Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. What a desperate verse that is. How awful the earth has become, the population within it. Wickedness of man, so great on earth, every intention, not half of the intentions, not 75%, every single one, intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil. Every single one. And it was continually, all the time. Evil, intentioned, all the time. Wow. And Yahweh regretted that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. He grieved. He was sad. He was grieved in his heart. And he regretted having made humankind. Just think about that. How hard it is to get a group of people, every one of them, to be thinking the same way. Think about your town or your village or your city that you're near, or the population, a state, a country. How can you get every person to be the same way and thinking evil all the time? There's always a group of people that want to go against the grain. There's always somebody that thinks differently. But no, here it's evil every time, continually. In verse 7, Yahweh said, I will blot out humankind that I have created from the face of the earth, humans, along with animals, creeping things, birds of the heavens, for I regret that I have made them. That is quite a statement by God, and it must have hurt his heart a lot to think, I'm looking at having to start over again. Well, we're going to look backwards in the chapter to the beginning and look at some verses and see how this situation happened. How did this world get to this point? So I'm going to read through several verses here, and then we're going to go back and unpack them and really get so that we understand them, really go through it. So verse 1, chapter 6. And when man began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, verse 2, the sons of God saw the daughters of man, that they were desirable, and they took for themselves wives of all that they chose. In verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after this, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old and famous men. So let's take a look at who's involved in these verses first. We'll start with that. So we see sons of God in verse 2 and in verse 4. That phrase, that biblical original language phrase, is always talking about, when it says sons of God, is always talking about beings, life forms, so to speak, that God made, that God was directly involved with. So, for example, in the singular, Son of God, Jesus Christ, right? He was God's son, and God made him. He was involved directly with making Jesus Christ. The other person that is the Son of God is Adam. It refers to Adam as being a son of God that same way, because God made him. When it's plural, sons of God, it's talking about spirit beings, angels, for example, and the other spirit beings that there are. So spiritual beings that God created, those are the sons of God. And you can look through them and you can see that through the Bible. So that we're going to look at some examples. In Job chapter 1, verse 6, it says, and one day when the sons of God came to present themselves before Yahweh, Satan also came along among them. So these are angels, and they're coming to God to present themselves, and Satan showed up too. Psalm 29:1 says, render to Yahweh, you sons of God, render to Yahweh glory and strength. He deserves your praise and your glory, and they do a lot of that. Psalm 89:6, for who in the clouds is equal to Yahweh? Who among the sons of God is like Yahweh? Satan thought he was, and he was wrong. No one. There are no angels that are like Yahweh. And then Galatians 3:26 is interesting because it says, for you are all sons of God through trust in Christ Jesus. Well, why is that? Because God makes the gift Holy Spirit, and he puts that inside us, and we've got that. And then when Christ returns, we get a resurrected body. That comes from God too. So we are sons of God also, which is really cool. So now the other entity in here in these verses in Genesis are the Nephilim. Now, I think in the King James, I think it probably says giants in that. The giants were on the earth, something like that. But the word is Nephilim. And when translators are translating the Bible and taking from Bible language to English, in this case, sometimes there are words in the text that do not exist. They're a word that's in the language of the Bible language, but it's not in existence in English, for example. And so the translators have to decide, well, how do we communicate then if we don't have that word? And they have different ways of doing that, but sometimes the answer is, you know what? We just need to add a new word to the English language here. And that's what happened with the word Nephilim. And what they do is they take the letters of Hebrew in this case and turn them into English letters, and it becomes the same word. So Nephilim in Hebrew is Nephilim. It is the plural of Nephil. So if there's one of them, it's Nephil, but if there's more than one of them, it's Nephilim. So it's the same thing, and it means fallen ones. They are fallen ones. So what happened? The sons of God, angels, saw the daughters of man that they were desirable, and they took for themselves wives of all that they chose. Wait a minute. That sounds really wrong, doesn't it? A spirit being taking a human being? That just sounds wrong. What angel in heaven, in God's heaven, what angels would do that? And the answer is none, because they know it's wrong. They would never do that. They'd never want to do that. But the fallen angels, the angels that rebelled with Satan and fell to the earth, the demons of this earth, they're more than happy to do wrong things, aren't they? And that's them. These angels, these sons of God, are referring to the fallen angels on earth, the demons. They saw the daughters of man that they were desirable. There's something that those women had that they needed and they wanted. It was desirable. So what do? They took for themselves wives of all that they chose. And in verse 4, it says, sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. Well, how can that possibly be? Spirit and physical doesn't mix. There's absolutely no way a spirit can father a child in a human being. It can't happen. Not the way a physical man does, at least. So how did they get children? And the answer is with biological or genetic manipulation. Just like they do in laboratories around the world today, scientists have figured out how to manipulate cells and cause them to come to life and do things with them. Well, the devil spirits were way ahead of the game. They were much more knowledgeable and invasive and willing to do evil things, and they did. So they manipulated and genetically manipulated the egg of the woman and brought forth a child. And they've had a lot of practice doing this already. They've done it to plants by this time. Remember, God said that the ground was going to yield plants, thistles and thorns and things that were harmful. Plants weren't originally like that in the garden, but they became that way because plants were manipulated. Animals were vegetarian, and now they started being carnivores and eating each other. And they even have a hierarchy, a food chain of who gets to eat who in the animal kingdom. So they are adept at manipulating life and causing things to happen that were never, never intended. It's an evil, evil place. And the wicked one, the power of the world, enables that. So they were able to manipulate the woman's egg and make it turn into a child, but that child had no father. It was manipulated. It has no father. It is not part of Adam's line. It's not. It's a thing. It's like a mutant or something. It's a human form, looks like a human. Some of them became very large, like Goliath. He was Nephilim that came later, but here they are, and they are unredeemable, and they're incredibly wicked. They're evil. They have these evil thoughts all the time. They're evil and they're powerful, and they can marry physical human women and produce children because they are in the physical world and they can do that. And they do that. And before long, the Nephilim are controlling and dominating the population of the world to the point of what we read that it was so evil that every thought continually was evil. And that's what happened. It says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Those days, which days? The days when the Son of God came to the daughters of men and had the children. Those, the Nephilim, were the mighty men who were of old, the famous men, and they dominated the earth. But Noah found favor in Yahweh's eyes. Despite how wicked the world was, all appeared to be lost. Noah found favor in Yahweh's eyes, and now Yahweh is going to initiate some action. He's going to intervene to ensure his promise is fulfilled and that rescue plan and restoration plan can continue. These, verse 9 of chapter 6, these are the descendants of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. Noah walked with God. Noah was the father of three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, it has this word blameless in here. And that word blameless is the word, same word that's used for animals that are going to be sacrificed in the future. It talks about how for example, in the time of Moses and so on, how the lamb had to be spotless. It had to be without blemish. It means it had to be without any defect. That same word that described the perfect animals that were needed to be sacrificed, that's the same word that's called blameless in this verse. Noah was blameless. He was not defective. He was not Nephilim. He did not have that defect. Among the people of his time, he was blameless. So Satan had succeeded to get all of mankind into a permanent, unredeemable state, except for Noah and his family. So the only place where the seed of the woman could possibly come through, remember Eve? The seed of the woman, all the way through, it had to be in Adam's line. All the Nephilim are outside of that. Only Noah and his family were left, that it could be pursued. And so God intervenes. The earth was corrupt before God, verse 11, and the earth was filled with violence. God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt because all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So, verse 14, make an ark of gopher wood. You are to make rooms in the ark, covered inside and outside with pitch. So he assigned him a big project, but Noah was pretty highly motivated to make it work. It says in 17, even I am bringing a flood of water on the earth to destroy from under the heavens all flesh, which is the breath of life. Everything that's on the earth will breathe its last, but I will establish my covenant with you. You are to come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And Yahweh said to Noah, come with all your household into the ark, for I have seen you to be righteous before me in this generation. You are to take 7 pairs of every clean animal with you, male and female. So 7 pairs of the clean animals. So 14 animals of the clean ones in pairs of 2. Of the animals that are not clean, take 2, the male and the female. Also of the birds of the heavens, 7 pairs, so 14 of the birds, to keep seed alive on the face of all the earth. And in 7 days I will cause it to rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Every living thing that I made I will blot out from the surface of the ground. And Noah did according to all that God commanded him. So God gave him a head start to build this ark, but it didn't have to be a cruise ship or a yacht or something. It just needed to float really well. So probably more like a barge than anything. And it had to have lots of places to store lots of stuff because it's going to be on the water a long time, and it's big to handle all the animals, all the supplies, the handful of people, and it's going to be a long time. We're going to see it was just over a year that they were in it. So it's a long time. It's a big vessel. And Noah, I'm sure, was diligent about doing it well, the way God directed. And then when time came in verse 4, 7 days, I'll cause it to rain on the earth for 40 days, verse 4 there. That means the animals were gathering, but God comes to Noah and says, you got 7 days to load it. You got 7 days to get everything in there because at the end of 7 days, it's going to start with water. So he gave him the 7 days to get ready, and he did so. In verse 11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all the fountains of the great deep were burst open and the windows of heaven were opened. It wasn't just a thunderstorm or a series of them. No, it was the fountains of the great deep burst open and poured water onto the earth through the windows of heaven. And so the flood started in the year 2306 BC, and we're going to see that it ended the following year in 2305. The flood was 40 days on the earth, the water pouring in. The waters increased and lifted up the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. The waters rose and greatly increased upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the waters. The waters rose very, very high upon the earth, and all the high mountains that were under all the heavens were covered. All flesh that moved on the earth took its last breath. Birds, livestock, animals, every swarming thing that swarms on the earth, and all humankind, all the Nephilim, everybody, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life of all that was on the dry land, died. Every living thing that was on the face of the ground was blotted out, from humankind to livestock to creeping things to birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah remained and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters rose over the earth 150 days. That's about 5 months, right? 30 days a month, that'd be 5 months. And they got in the ark in the second month. On the seventh month, the ark rested, and the ark rested in the seventh month, which would be 5 months after the second month. And it rested on the 17th day of the month on the mountains of Ararat. So 5 months. The waters receded continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. And I'm in chapter 8, verses 4 and 5. Verse 13, and in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters began to dry up from the earth. Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked. He saw that the surface of the ground had begun to dry up at the first of the year in the first month on the first day. So starting to dry up. And in the second month, verse 14, on the 27th day of the month, which is 1 year and 10 days after they entered the ark, the earth was completely dry. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, including birds, livestock, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may increase abundantly on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So that was God's direction. It's safe to get out, get everything out of the ark. And what does Noah do? Verse 20, chapter 8, verse 20, he builds an altar to Yahweh. And he took of every clean animal, of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. First thing he does, he builds an altar to God because he recognizes Yahweh is great and magnificent and merciful. He is recognizing God, acknowledging God, and worshiping God and being thankful to God. What an unbelievable time. He gets off that ark after just over a year, and they've made it in this dry land. And now he looks around. There's 8 of people, and all the animals that are on the earth are right there. They just got off the ark. So he takes of every clean animal and of every clean bird. So it's a good thing they brought 14 of those, because if he'd only brought 2 clean animals, every clean animal would be extinct after this. Because if you kill even one, there's only one left, and it's either a male or female. So, good thing, planning ahead, 14 of them. Well, verse 21, Yahweh smelled the pleasant aroma, and Yahweh said in his heart, he said this, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, because the imagination of people's hearts evil from their youth, nor will I ever again strike down everything as I've done. Not going to do it again. And look at this one. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night will not cease, regardless of what the climate activists say today. It's going to keep going. The cycles that the earth goes through, the seasons in an annual basis, for example, the seed time, there's going to be time to plant, and there's going to be time to harvest. There's going to be cold and heat, summer, winter, day and night. It's going to keep on going. Look at your feet. Are you on the ground? Are you on the earth? Well, then all this is going to keep going. It's solid and it's going to stay solid. You can count on it. So God is pleased with that offering, and that concept of sacrifice is developing too. You can see that it's part Noah already knows about it, and he's really demonstrated that, and in the right way, it pleased God. And God made some unconditional promises in his heart. He didn't ask, he didn't say this is dependent on anything. He just says, while the earth remains, I guess maybe that's a condition, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat. But people can't affect it, animals can't affect it. It's going to keep on happening. Now, God's going to inform Noah of expectations, and this is going to kind of come in a covenant form or format. It's this idea of covenant kind of develops through the Bible as it goes forward. And so we're going to look at it kind of that way. And it does conclude with a firm covenant. So a covenant is an agreement between two parties. They realize that to make something happen, party number one has to agree to do something, and party number two has to agree to do something. So they come together and they say, hey, look, let's make a deal. I'll do my part, you do your part, and we're going to agree to do this thing. And then once that agreement is achieved, then they memorialize that with something physical that they can look at and remember every time they see this thing, this memorial, that, yeah, I agreed to that. I need to hold up my end of the bargain. So they might pile up a bunch of rocks or something, maybe some kind of a pile of rocks, and that's their memorial. So every time I pass that and I see those rocks there, yeah, I made the agreement. So they do something like that. So let's just trace through this and see how this develops. God informs Noah. So first he's going to start with man's responsibility. Party number one, man. What's his responsibilities and with the administrative conditions. So let me talk for a moment about administrations. What I mean by that. Every period of time in chunks of history have I'm going to call it rules of life. There's things that life just follows, and people need to behave appropriately within that context of the way things are. So, for example, paradise. Paradise was a unique place. It was wonderful. Adam and Eve had their things to do, and the garden was there, and they could eat everything except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it was great. But when they sinned, things changed. Remember when God talked to the serpent, he talked to Adam, he talked to Eve, and talked about things. And now the rules of life have changed. Paradise was great. That administration is over. We're entering a new administration now with Adam and Eve and the serpent. So the ground is going to be hard to grow stuff out of. You'll be able to, but it's hard by your sweat, by toil. You'll be able to grow things. And thorns and thistles are going to start popping up. And it's going to be harder and more painful to give birth to children. So things like that. The world is changing. The rules of life are changing. And oh, by the way, you're going to need clothing. And sacrifices get introduced, the concept of substitution sacrifice. So the world changed, the rules, the context, a new administration started. And now we come to Noah's time. The world just got flooded. Everything's gone except for this bunch here. The rules are changing again. And so God is going to describe that now. What are the rules of this administration? That's where he's going to start. So Genesis 9, verse 1, God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to populate the earth, have babies, have progeny, and populate, fill the earth with people. Verse 2, now it's going to change. The fear of you and the dread of you will come upon every animal of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens. So they're going to be afraid of you. They're going to dread you. They're going to run away from you. It's not going to be like it was. That's different. Everything which moves on the ground and all the fish of the sea are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives will be food for you. So that's a big difference. Up to now, it was just a vegetarian diet, eating the plants and so on, and the fruit thereof. But now you can also eat everything that moves, everything that lives and moves. It's food for you. But, verse 4, flesh with its life, its blood, you are not to eat. Don't eat the animal with the blood of the animal. That's not acceptable. So these are rules of the administration here. Verse 5, surely I will require a reckoning for your lifeblood. From the hand of every animal I will require it, and from the hand of every man. From the hand of a brother human I will require a reckoning for the life of a human. It's not right to kill a person. And it's not right for an animal to kill a person. It's not right for a human to kill a person. It's not right for murder. And if that happens, the murderer or the killer needs to die, and it needs to die by the hand of a human. It isn't going to be dying from God's hand, it's from a human hand. And that's the administration of justice on the earth goes to mankind in this administration. Verse 6, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his blood is to be shed. For God made man in his own image. So it's not right to kill somebody. This is capital punishment. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his blood is to be shed, should be killed. And then verse 7, the bookend by fruit, be fruitful and multiply, increase abundantly on the earth and multiply on it. So that kind of wraps up the man side of this discussion. Now let's look at God's side. What's he going to do? Verse 8 of chapter 9, God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, and I, verse 9, behold, I now establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you and with every living soul that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every animal on the earth with you, of all that go out of the ark, every animal on the earth. This covenant is not only between God and humans, it's between God and all soul life on the planet. Everything. Verse 11, I will establish my covenant with you. All flesh will not be cut off again by the waters of a flood, nor will there again be a flood to destroy the earth. It's not going to happen again. Count on it. So we have the physical earth that we have the guarantee of by God that the seasons will happen, the winter, the summer, the heat, the cold, the planting, the harvest, the night and the day, all that's in place. Plus, there's no flood coming that's going to wipe us all out again. That's not going to happen. And he made that covenant, that promise, unconditional. And so we come to the memorial. What is the memorial? What is the thing that we look at, that God looks at, and we remember this agreement that God has made? God said, verse 12, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living soul that's with you for all generations to come. I set my bow in the cloud, and it will be a sign of a covenant between me and the earth, the rainbow. And when I cloud the earth with clouds and the bow is seen in the clouds, I'll remember my covenant that's between me and you and every living soul of all flesh, and the waters will never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, I'll look at it, remembering the everlasting covenant between God and every living soul of the flesh that's on the earth. Then God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that's on the earth. And I got to think it's probably more for our benefit than God's. I kind of think he wouldn't forget about that. But isn't it reassuring? And how loving is that for God to do that? Here's the rainbow, and what that means is it's never going to happen again. And every time you see it, remember that. What a great thing. What a neat thing. So we're going to summarize what we learned here. First of all, Yahweh takes action to ensure his promise is fulfilled. He had to make sure that his plan could move forward, and he was down to 8 people, Noah and his family. That was it. That's the only way that the Messiah could come. men be born of the seed of the woman. It came down to that. It was a close call. So he interacts and he makes things happen. And he made an unconditional covenant. And it's good to know covenants and promises extend forward through administrations until they're fulfilled. It isn't like when a new administration comes and a new covenant is made that removes automatically the old one. No, if the old one hasn't been fulfilled, then it's still in play too. So, for example, God promised the seed of the woman was coming. The Messiah is going to be born. At the time of Noah, was the Messiah born? No. Now he's promising he's not going to flood, or the earth will not flood again. That's a promise. The Messiah is still coming, so now there's two of them. And all the other things that he's promised that we saw, or it moves forward. It hasn't been replaced, it's been added to. And it keeps on going until they're fulfilled. So covenants and promises, they layer on top of each other, and they don't contradict each other. They layer on top of each other, and they overlap. And God's actions and communications, they remain consistent with fulfilling all of them. He's not going to communicate something that cross purposes with one, or he's not going to take an action or inspire an action that prevents one but not the others. It's always consistent with it. So as these layers of promises and covenants come on top of each other, it helps us kind of zero in on what the plan is. And we'll see that as we go forward. It'll start getting more and more refined. That picture of the solution becomes more and more refined as we go forward in biblical history. The Rainbow Covenant establishes a firm physical basis for mankind. And guess what? It's still in effect today. From way back then, it's still in effect today. Day and night, cold and heat, seasons for planting and harvesting, all of that stays. Not going to flood the earth, stays. We have a firm physical basis now. It's guaranteed by God, a physical basis for our lives established on earth. And that's really important. The devil realizes he needs to focus on Noah's family to prevent the Messiah from coming. He's not going to stop. He's, got the plug pulled out on what he was doing for right now, but there's only 8 people now, so he's going to work furiously to make sure that the Messiah is never born. That's his goal, and he's going to work hard at it. And we'll see that as we continue forward. And that's pretty much it for this session. So as we see the rainbow appear here, thank you for being with me on this session. I hope it was interesting for you, and that you just recognize how great God is, how merciful he is, how awesome he is, and how loving he is. It's just wonderful. So thank you for being with me. See you at the next session.